After a bombshell tweet late last week, Nintendo fans are ascending. And by that, I mean they had Switch 2 trending on Twitter, which I guess is not out of the norm. And some are saying we could see the next generation hardware as early as this week. Although that I personally do have my doubts that it is going to be this week, in this week's video, I would like to guess the likelihood of what the next console's name is going to be. And just to be clear, I'm not ranking what my favorite name is, I'm ranking what name I think is the most likely to be real. And even though the likelihood of any of these names being real is pretty low, I think it would be fun to explore the options nonetheless. So without further ado, let's go right into the video. The first category of names, I guess you could say, are the callback names, essentially giving a nod to old consoles. The first name I think I'm going to try to rank is Switch, you know. Anyways, let's look at the next name. The next name on our tier list is the Nintendo Switch Advance, clearly giving a nod to the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. Admittedly, I do like the name a lot. However, I do find it very unlikely for Nintendo to go this route. Although this name does maintain brand continuity by keeping Switch in the name, Nintendo never seems to go back to old branding though. So for those reasons, I'm going to put it in the B tier. Moving on, let's talk about a name that you've surely heard around. That name being the Super Nintendo Switch, obviously paying a homage to the original successor console, the Super Nintendo. Now, this name is amazing for multiple reasons really. First is like I said, this was the original successor console, and we are talking about another successor console, so right there's a really nice tie-in. Both the words Super and Switch start with S, adding symmetry, and the name just rolls off the tongue. And even though I did say Nintendo doesn't revisit old branding, I feel like if they were to break that rule, it's definitely for this one. But all in all, I think I'm going to put the Super Nintendo Switch in the A tier. And as for the final name that is kind of a callback, is the new Nintendo Switch. The callback being for the new 3DS line of systems. And really, this one is going straight to C tier. First off, even back in the day, it was such a terrible name, very confusing. It was supposed to be the Pro line of 3DS systems, but it really wasn't coming across that way. Not only that, if Nintendo does decide to reuse the new branding, I feel like it'll be more confusing for us Nintendo fans really, because now we associate the new with Pro, so it'll sound like it's the Pro Nintendo Switch, not a Switch 2, you know what I mean? Breaking away from the nostalgia, the next name I have is the Switch Plus. Really, there's pros and cons for this name. Starting with the pros, it kind of indicates an enhanced version. The plus symbol can simply symbolize the additional horsepower that the system is rumored to have. The branding could be simple and modern, aligning with the minimalist naming trends that we have in this day and age. And you can still do all of that while still maintaining the Switch brand recognition. However, some of the cons might include that the plus kind of feels very, I don't know, underwhelming I guess? It doesn't necessarily scream this is next gen hardware and this is a major step up, it's just, you know, something additional. And also the plus kind of feels like it might just be like an XL system like the Nintendo 3DS XL for example. So for that reason I am going to put it in the B tier. But before we move on to the next name, I have something very quick to say. If this is your first time here, hey, my name's Acadrien and I post weekly Nintendo videos. If that's something you enjoy, I would greatly appreciate it if you would consider to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's go right back into the video. The next name we're going to be looking at is the Nintendo Switch Up. This is another one of those names that you must have seen online at one point, and I'm not 100% sure where it originates from, but whoever did come up with it, I totally see where they were going with it, because clearly they were trying to have a play on words with the word Switch, but I'm not too sure I quite like this name. I will admit it is pretty easy to market because it is kind of catchy and it's easy to remember, but again, if we're talking about next generation hardware, I feel like it's slightly underwhelming. Also, the name technically won't make sense with the console anyways because we know it's supposed to be an iteration, meaning it's going to be a lot of, you know, more of the same. So the name Switch Up also just kind of doesn't make sense because nothing's really switching up, it's just more power. So because of that, I'm going to put the Nintendo Switch Up in the B tier. Moving on to the next name, you could almost say that this name is like a street name, because there's already a lot of people that are calling it by this name anyways, and that is the Switch 2. Although a lot of people might find it boring, you must admit it's very practical as a name, because you're not sacrificing the Switch branding, and it's very clear that this is the sequel to the Switch, the next one. And although the Nintendo Switch 2 is my personal pick, I'm gonna have to put it in the A tier. Because here's the thing, even though this is technically my personal pick, I do see a few issues with this. First off, Nintendo has absolutely never in the past created a secondary follow-up console and named it the 2 or the 3, you know what I mean? We had Game Boy Color Advance, we had the DS, 3DS, Wii U, but never the number 2. And really, when you look at the gaming industry, there's not actually anyone that does that outside of Sony with the PlayStation. Over at Microsoft, you have the Xbox, then the Xbox 360, then the Xbox One, and now we have the Series X and S. So although I'm not sure that that is a deal breaker for Nintendo, it will be a deal breaker for me, and I can't put it in the S tier because of it. However, this next name I think is also very effective. And hear me out on this one. How about the Nintendo Switch successor? First off, you're not sacrificing the branding of the Switch, you're still keeping the word Switch in there. But also, the word successor is quite literally what it is, you know? It's the next evolution of Switch. It's perfectly stupid, so Nintendo already probably loves it. And imagine how funny this tweet would have been, looking back, if this was actually the name. But yeah, overall, I think the likelihood of them actually naming it that though is still pretty low, so I'm gonna have to put it in the B section. Now, this next name is a little weird, because it actually comes from a 4chan leak, and that name is the Nintendo Switch version 2, to which I'm going to refer to as the V2. And here's the thing with this name, because at first it kind of sounds horrible, but the more that I think about it, the more that I actually kind of like the name. First off, you're not abandoning the Switch branding, so that's a check. And you're also clearly stating that this is the evolution of the Switch. This is the next Switch, the second version, what comes after the first one. And on top of that, calling it straight out the version 2 is so stupid and so Nintendo. And for those reasons, that is why I'm going to put the Switch V2 in the S tier. But with all that being said, that concludes all the names I have on my tier list. But now is when I want to hear from you. And I want you guys to go crazy in the comment section. I want you to really get creative with it, but I want to see, what do you think this next console is going to be called, like actually going to be called? But also, I want to hear what you would call it if you were in charge. I'm very curious to see what you guys are going to come up with. But yeah, with all that being said, until next time, what else?